Hallmarkies podcast. Merry Christmas in July. It's very exciting. We are here to talk about my favorite Hallmark Christmas movie. What? Oh my gosh. Wow. Yes. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and my friend Alysa is here. And thank you so much for coming and talking. We're doing On Friendship on Trading Christmas. So exciting.
I'm scared if this is her favorite Hallmark movie.
Yeah, I love this movie. I think it is so well written. Not only do you get one couple that has I think more than just your typical relationship, that there's some, I think, meat on the bones, but you get three couples. Three couples. I mean, what other Hallmark movie can say that? And I love the casting. I think the script is really good. Mm-hmm. And I know this might be controversial, but it's the same idea of a story as The Holiday. Mm-hmm. But I think this is better. I like it better because.
Can I say this? And I'm not just saying it to like appease you because it's your favorite movie, but when it started, I was like, oh, this is kind of like The Holiday. And then except for Jude Law being in The Holiday, I thought this was way better too. So
yeah.
Like I enjoyed the story a whole lot better, and I thought the relationships made a lot more sense, and I thought the story was cute. So the only thing that was missing for me was Jude Law, but I can catch him in some other stuff.
I take a Tom Cavanaugh over Jude Law any day. Any day.
You know, he was good. He was good. Like, could we have like Jude Law as like a neighbor checking in on him? Here's some cookies.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been that big of a Cameron Diaz fan, so I think that's what holds me back. Because the Kate Winslet part of Holiday is delightful. Yeah. But I actually think Nancy Meyers, who directed that movie, is kind of overrated as a director. Sorry. But I people always act like she's equivalent to Nora Ephron. Not even close. No way. To me, her best movie by far is her remake of Parent Trap.
Oh, and I'm a huge Parent Trap fan. That's one of the original with Haley Mills is one of my favorites, and I thought they did an excellent job with the remake. It just wasn't my age group right at that time, and I was Haley Mills. But I also agree with you, like the cast, I like Jude Law, and then I like Kate Winslet, but the other, like, so I wasn't really on board, but I did just watch My Best Friend's Wedding, and I think Cameron Diaz, I think that might be my favorite role of her.
Her first
she's
role,
very endearing in that movie.
Yeah, that or in The Mask, she's fine.
Oh, I haven't. I don't think I've seen them. That's a big movie. I don't think I've seen.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we should talk about that. So you have been on a movie watching bonanza.
Yes, I think I'm now over 175, but I haven't entered. So I have a Google Drive, listeners, file that has all the movies I've watched. It has the TV shows I watched and what season I'm on. And then it has any of like documentary or comedy specials or true crime type stuff that doesn't fit into like a movie. Like the Michael Jordan 30 by 30, like that's in there.
Right.
And then I have a list of movies that I want to watch. And so but since I think Rachel and I have talked last, one of the things that I've done to really boost my movie watching is, so I have Hulu, and then I have Netflix through my brother, and I am on a family plan for YouTube TV. So I have lots of different, and then I use my mom's Amazon Prime. But I have Hulu, I have HBO on it, I added Stars, I added Cinemax, and I added Showtime. I've already watched everything I need to via Cinemax, so we got rid of that. And I think I'm going to keep Showtime and Stars through the summer, just to be sure I've seen everything. Right. So I haven't added in the movies that I've watched through Showtime over the last few days. So I might be up to 180 actually.
My gosh. That is amazing. You're ready to write a whole book, I think.
Well, I think I'm going to write some blog posts once I hit like 200 and like 250, why I'm doing it, sort of what I'm learning. I might do something, a blog post specifically about friendship, like things that I've noticed in the TV I've been watching. So
that is impressive. Would you say that there have been any that have like we needed a whole podcast on this, by the way.
I know we should do that, but yeah, feel free to ask this question.
What is there been one that's like one or two that has particularly stood out?
You know, when we might have talked about this before, or it might have been on a Best Forevers with a guest that comes on frequently. Her name is Claire. That Leap Year, the romantic comedy.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was cute. Revenge of the Nerds does not hold up and probably should not have been made. And you know, right now I'm watching Rules of Engagement with Samuel L. Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones, and I'm kind of like, snooze fest, next Tommy Lee Jones movie, please. But that's the thing that's like fresh in my mind. But those are the things that stick out right now. But yeah, we'll have to do a podcast episode about this where I think so. Take some notes and things like that and prepare, because I don't have the list in front of me. So something might stand out if I looked at it.
I think we need to. Yeah. I think what makes this the best Hallmark movie, in my opinion, Trading Christmas, is that I think that the writing is just on a different level than you typically see in these movies. Mm-hmm. These characters are complex. They have backstories. They have multiple facets to their personalities. They're not just like either perfect or villains or, you know, kind of a thing. And you really get to kind of feel like you really understand them as people in a way that I don't think you usually get to, which I love those, you know, I love Hallmark movies, but I think that this is just on a different level as far as their relationship. There's an intimacy that you see that you never see in Hallmark movies here, where they actually are adults and they kiss and they, you know, kind of a thing that you don't typically get to see.
Sorry, that was right. They're adults. Well, can I say, like, I would agree with you on that. And obviously you host a Hallmark specific podcast, so clearly you've seen a lot more than me, who you brought on a year ago to talk about movies. So I'm probably still under having seen 30 movies with you. And I've also watched with my mom. But this one did feel different. And I think what we actually get to see that we don't necessarily see sort of organically happen, and that's relationship development. Like in other movies, it's just like moments or snapshots where you're actually seeing it sort of like happen as it is, right? So you can see them meeting and then kind of vibing and then kind of, that's one couple, obviously, because another couple doesn't vibe at all, right? But you kind of see the whole process, which as a communication and relationship person who studies it and teaches it and talks about it for my podcast, that was very exciting for me. So I would agree with you. In the limited sample size of what I have of what I've seen, it felt different than the other movies that I've seen, but I'm still going to hold on to Christmas Joy for the rest of my life as the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Isn't that a cookie crawls? If Boston had a cookie crawl for Faith Ford, I think then this would be the best Christmas movie ever made.
6 crowns out of 5.
Yes. So basically it starts out, and I know the characters have names, but I don't care. It's just Faith Ford. Faith Ford, Tom Cavanaugh, Gil Bellows, Gabrielle Miller. Okay.
I actually wrote them down because I was trying to be prepared and
Emily.
specific.
I think her name is Emily.
Yeah, but then there's a character whose face, so that's confusing because I actually wrote down their real names. Okay. Or that character name.
Yeah. So basically, Faith Ford's character, she's lonely. She's still grieving. Her husband had passed away 3 years previous to this film. And she lives in the small town. She's a second grade teacher. And you get the feeling that her life is in kind of a rut. Like she's happy and she seems like a happy person, but she's not growing as a person. And I think you see that. And she has one daughter, Heather, who is in school in Boston. And she's in some town that's 150 miles away from Seattle. I forget.
In Washington, I was like, Boston's way further away than that.
And I'm like, does it snow that much in Washington? But I guess it does, because they have, especially when you're that high up.
Yeah, I've never been to Washington, but it's on my bucket list.
Yeah. This sort of introduction before they actually swap is a little bit longer than I remembered,
Mm-hmm.
getting to revisit it. It was interesting to me, and that was nice because you get to kind of know these characters
Mm-hmm.
before they're sort of thrust into this house swap
Yeah.
situation. And basically you see Tom Cavanaugh and Gil Bellows, they're talking, and Tom Cavanaugh has writer's block. Gil Bellows is trying to decide whether he's going to sell his company, and they talk about that they're just going to have Chinese food and watch the
Mm.
Celtics. That's their idea of Christmas, which is
I
so
mean, here's
sad.
it is, but also at the same time, like people create traditions, like their
Yeah,
siblings, right? It's like so that's how they grew up. And so like it is, and they probably want something more, but it's good to have some sort of tradition, right?
right.
And maybe it should be like the day after tradition or something like that. But I was at least appreciative that they had something that they did together, so they're not
Yeah.
being completely by themselves, right? So
Yeah, that's true. And that
yeah.
it is interesting that you sort of establish those traditions almost whether you like it or not. It's
Yeah,
just human nature.
they happen like as a kid, or it's just like something that you did and then the next year you don't know what to do, so you're just like, well, let's do what we did last year. Sometimes people
Yeah.
might talk about them more specifically and plan, but I think a lot of it just happens way more organically than we can even imagine.
Yeah, it's true. There's the whole, joke about how that Christmas is the Chinese food is Jewish Christmas.
Yeah. No.
They go.
Well, can I tell you just a real quick family
Yeah.
tradition that we have? So on Christmas morning, I don't know, maybe 20 or so years ago. No, I would have been 20 when I was a kid. So probably
Yeah.
like 30 some years ago, my
Right.
parents bought a Sara Lee coffee cake just on a whim. And
Uh-huh.
us kids, we never got stuff like that per se. So when we got like the sugar cereal at Grandma and Grandpa's, it was
Right.
like Fruit Loops. So they got it and we loved it. So for like 30 some years to this day, we still do coffee cake, and it has to be Sara Lee. And there's been years that my mom, sorry mom, calling you out, accidentally bought the one with like the walnuts in it, and it's like no nuts in it. And this year we could not find it anywhere, and I was like, this is devastating, because there's a movie called The Bronx Tale, and this kid is making fun of a gangster's named Coffee Cake, and he's like, I can't do coffee cake, trying to like imitate him. He's like,
Yeah.
I can't do. So every year since I've seen that movie, I just say that like 5,000 times around Christmas. I can't do coffee cake. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do the annoying tradition of me saying this 5,000 times if we don't have coffee cake?
Yeah.
So we created a new tradition, and my dad and I made coffee cake, and it had blueberries and all this. It was so good. And so it's kind of fun, like that thing happened on a whim, and now it's like we can't even imagine Christmas morning without it. So and they were like, I guess we're just not going to have it. I was like, oh no, we're staying with tradition. We're just going to make it. And it ended up being the best coffee cake we've had for Christmas ever. So new tradition.
Yeah.
I just love that. That's like one of our main traditions, and I love
great.
it.
And that's how traditions often, if we go back, they were a lot of times started doing something random, and then they just become part of our lives. And,
yeah. I just love that. So sorry.
No, that's
Back
great.
Back to this movie,
that's
Chinese food and Celtics. That's a tradition
yeah,
too.
That's Gil Bellows. And how charming is Gil Bellows in this movie? Oh,
Do I know who this was? Because I didn't look him up when I was watching it, so I need to. But I was like, who is this delightful man? And I was like, can I say that I'm 42? I might not look it, but I am 42. And it made me go, if I met him in this scenario.
So swoon-worthy, right?
I was like, I was really impressed with him. It felt so natural. And like, I like Faith Ford. Like, I even know who she is, and I'm not, I don't watch as much Hallmark as maybe listeners do, right? But I was like, I know who she is, of course. And then I was like,
she's on Murphy Brown.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's where it starts from. Yes, but he was top notch. He might be one of my, if not top guy in a Hallmark movie. I mean, that's a bold statement, but I adored him. He was delightful. Can you tell? I'm
He was so good. He was
over the top excited about him.
he was on Ally McBeal. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but he's been on a million stuff. Like I'm looking at his IMDb, and he has so many credits. So he's one of those just working actors that just that's amazing. And I have to just say, I'm just looking at his filmography right now. He has an upcoming show called Love in the Time of Corona. What?
I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but I'll probably watch it because he's in it.
I think we need to cover it. Let's plan on that.
Even if it's not about friendship, can we just, for the purposes
cover Love in the Time.
Loving him?
How can Love in the Time of Corona not be about friendship?
People are social distancing. I did hear about, and when I say hear about, Facebook or Twitter, that a couple met on like Bumble or whatever, the apps, and then went to McDonald's. They both went through the drive-thru, and then they sat in a parking lot, rolled down their window, and ate their McDonald's and talked to each other. And I was like,
that is romantic.
Yeah, well, you know.
I think so.
I might have gone for like, I don't know, Qdoba or something.
Yeah. Does this guy have class? What's going on here? No, that's so funny. Yeah. But yeah, he is so charming in this movie, I think.
Yeah. I'm really excited about adding some of his credits onto my watch list.
Yeah, me too. So then you have Gabriel Miller playing Faith, who is basically working at this events planning company, and she's pretty hilarious at the beginning. She's just like, how am I supposed to get you elves, and all this stuff. You don't have no elves, and I don't know, pretty funny. And then you have her, she finds out that at the beginning, she rips up the card that she gets from her ex because his new wife is pregnant. And
why are you sitting that Christmas, bro? No, this is not the good time. Tell me another time. I don't care.
Yeah, we find out about more about her backstory. And again, like I said, each one of these characters is like a fully fledged, unique character. Yeah. And so she's obviously frustrated in a frustrated situation. Yeah. Then you find out, you meet Heather, who's the only one that, for whatever reason, I actually refer to by her character name and not her actor name, which is very confusing. Sorry. But she's dating Andrew Francis, who's one of my favorite Hallmark actors. Ooh. And this is one of his early parts. He go on to do more.
He looked familiar, but I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I loved interviewing him. I think cool. I think he does a good job with this role, because it's a part that would be so easy to just be the kind of the jerk. Yeah, taking away from her taking her away from her mother, but during he's not Christmas. Like he's actually very thoughtful. Mm-hmm. He's kind of clueless. Like, who doesn't know what it's like? I understand if you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, but who hasn't even heard of it? Like,
what rock are you living under?
Yeah, I mean, come on. And he's like, oh, black and white. What? Yeah, but I think he's actually like pretty thoughtful for this archetype. Yeah, like he's looking at her, he's thinking about her. He's trying to he gets rid of the guys when he sees that it's annoying her. Yeah, I think in the scheme of sort of jock high school college boyfriends, he's pretty decent.
Maybe even more than that. That might be an undersell.
Yeah.
To send the boys away, or to be that thoughtful and that sort of thing. Like, and that's obviously a stereotype. There are plenty of people, but that's, sort of the vibe you get from how many movies about high school and college are there that exist, right? So even if it's not Lifetime, or a Hallmark, I'm a Lifetime girl, we still get this like sort of trope of that kind of person. And to me, I thought they had a lovely relationship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was least concerned about them.
Right.
No
right.
offense
They
to
had
them.
a really stable
you're
relationship.
fine. Go away. I want to see what's going on with these other people.
Yeah. But it was really cute. I thought, she says, well, my mom calls me like 5 times a day. And he's like, you call her like 10 times a day. And she's like, it's different. She's the mom. And I think that's really true. And I think that's a theme of the movie, is that this relationship between Faith Ford and her daughter Heather, that they've been so kind of codependent upon each other, especially since the loss of their husband / father, that her kind of them both being kind of honest with each other by the end of this movie. I think you see a big growth in their relationship, and by the end you really see Heather is treating her mother as a co-equal.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is interesting. So not in the couple relationships, but the mother-daughter.
Yeah.
And then it made me think, well, first off, I was surprised that she was in Boston when her mom was in Washington and the father had passed away, because that seems like a great distance. And if they have some sort of codependency, that was probably very difficult, but at the same time, good for them, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think it just reminded me that at a certain point in life, depending on the type of relationship that you have with your parents, and if your parents are still with you, that sort of thing. Like, some people don't have good relationships. I have great relationship with my parents. I believe you do too. Mm-hmm. And so it just reminded me that, like, at a certain point in your life, you start to see your parent more as like a friend or than a parent. You know what I mean? They'll always be mom and dad. You always be I'll always be my parents' baby,
No, it's so true. Almost every
person. You
person
start to see them as real people.
Yeah, you do. That's right. You start to see their humanity, whereas they're the authority figure when you're growing up. They're the ones setting the rules. They're the ones setting, and then you reach a moment where you're like, they were like my age. They were just figuring this out like they were making it up as they went. They were doing the best that they could, and you start to see sort of their humanity.
Yeah.
Maybe harder when you're younger and they're the rule maker.
Yeah, you start to see them as having needs and wants and interests, and you can have conversations about things. And I do think maybe more so than when I was a child, that you do see more of at least people discussing that, maybe even before kids turn 18, that my mom or dad is more like a friend. So I think we see that more. I think families and relationships have changed. I wouldn't call my parents friends like until I was like 25. If someone
and it can be a sign
16, I would have been like,
it can be a sign of a toxic relationship if they're too dependent on.
Absolutely.
If there isn't that parental structure, and kids aren't allowed to be kids, but I think for most of us, we have that moment where it's like,
and I think that maybe the relationship probably changed when the husband and father passed away.
Sure.
And so that might, contribute to like the codependency, and that probably changed their relationship in some way. But I also think like their journey by the end is like a different relationship for the two of them.
Yeah. So Andrew Francis and Heather are going to Phoenix to stay at his grandparents' house that they have there. And I mean, that's always it's always a bad choice in a Christmas movie. You never go to the desert. You never go to warm climates. What's wrong with you? That's not a good choice.
What if they already live there? It's just different. But for Hallmark, have they had like a Christmas movie that's just all in like Arizona?
The closest that I
Florida?
can think of in a warm climate is there was a I think it was called A Rose for Christmas, I think. It was all about the girl who helps put on the Rose Parade.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it was in Pasadena.
Yeah.
So that's the only one I can think of. I know
everything else needs snow.
Not many. You gotta have snow. You gotta have snow. What? But anyway, so you know that this is not going to work out. Going to Phoenix, but Faith Ford decides that she's going to surprise her daughter, and she is going to show up in Boston for Christmas. and not knowing that her daughter is going to Phoenix. But she contacts Tom Cavanaugh through this house exchange, and Tom Cavanaugh decides that he needs to step away, and that he is going to go to this house in a small town, and so he switches houses with his apartment for her house, and they decide to do this. And I love Tom Cavanaugh so much. I kind of wonder if a bunch of his sort of quips were ad-libbed. I would love to know. Yeah. But, and he's like, the kids keep knocking on the door. He's like, I'm going to get the gun. He's joking. Like, he's joking.
Yeah, but he said a lot of things like, my brother, he doesn't talk to strangers, and he's like, maybe you shouldn't either.
Yeah, it's probably wise not to talk to strangers. They're like,
anyways, closing the door.
Yeah. And then all of the neighbors, maybe they do have a cookie crawl, and it's just like, he's not been informed, because they bring him a lot of cookies.
You're right. Why did I pick up on that? Oh, man.
Yeah, I think so. Because he has a whole table full of cookies and fruitcake. It's just so
funny because when they switch, it's like reflective of their town and their personality. Like,
right.
They're going to check in on you to be sure that you're okay in the house. And like the kids, I thought they were going to be adults, but it was like kids coming by. And then all these people came by to bring him food. And he's just like, every time the doorbell rings, he's like, what is wrong with these people?
It was great. I loved it. He was so funny. I loved him as this grump.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the movie.
Someone with writer's block. Watch out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Gabriel Miller's character decides that she's going to surprise Faith Ford, and their friends. In the book, they kind of go into it a little bit more about how, because obviously there's a big age difference between Faith Ford's character and Gabriel Miller. Oh. And they go in that they work together, like in the school board or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And,
so sorry, I was thinking the couples instead of like so it's like someone that she knows. And to me, it's like, what I love is that people who have differing friendships, as long as everyone's over 18 or more,
right,
those friendships, and otherwise, like if they're mentorships, you can talk about that. But I think it's important to consider that once we're all adults, age shouldn't matter.
Right.
That you can probably find a lot of friendships. So I thought that was cool. Like I was like, yes, it reminds me of some of my friends that I have through education and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Gabrielle Miller, she flies to Seattle, and then and I don't know how she was able to get on the plane, but she with an expired driver's license, but she can't get a car. Because she has an expired driver's license, and then she ends up driving with. I just thought she was funny. She's like, "Let me give you my card because I might need an elf." She ends up going with this elf and the Santa thing, and then later on, she knocks on the door, and it's at night, and and Tom Cavanaugh's there, and he's like, let me at him. Let me at Santa. Had it like the whole day. There's been nothing. I thought that was really funny because she ends up going through the back door.
Yeah, and he's in there, and they don't know what's Santa going on.
And the elf.
Yeah. Well, I just think that's interesting is like no one knows what's happening in this movie. like Faith in this guy's apartment, his brother doesn't know.
You're right.
This guy's in her house, her friend doesn't know, her daughter doesn't know. Like, it's the only people who know are Tom Cavanaugh and Faith Ford.
Yeah.
And they're across the country from each other.
Which is really funny. And in reality, these kinds of things just don't happen in real life very often, but it feels plausible at least.
Yeah.
It feels plausible. And so then, like you said, you have Faith Ford accidentally turning on the alarm. So she's trying to figure out the remotes and all this stuff in this apartment. She's like, it looks like a jail cell.
It's just like one of those sleek sort of
Mhm.
like, it looks like a guy's apartment in
Yeah,
Boston. Everything's gray and black.
I know. He's
And
living pretty good on I guess a author slash professor
yeah, I mean, he must
life.
be making bank on his books.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
I can't afford. I know professors that have worked in Boston, and I've seen the apartment they lived in is not that big.
No. And so yeah, the Gilbo surprises her with the police officers there, and that's all really funny. She's in a
Yeah,
robe and everything,
yeah,
and and then you see the nice contrast between her trying to add some decoration to
hmm
Tom Cavanaugh's apartment and him being really irritated with her decorations.
like, what is
It's a
this? We don't celebrate
contrast.
Christmas in my family. That's not how he
Yeah,
said what he
she's
said,
like,
but
what? And so yeah, so they start talking, and Gil Bellows is basically says that because he says I was in Florence last Christmas, and she's like, what?
yeah,
What? And he basically just like went to the gym and was in the hotel the
yeah,
whole time,
yeah,
not even experience anything, and and he just says basically like that's been the pattern. And
hmm
he gives a little nugget where he says, oh well, my brother was engaged for a little bit and we
yeah,
played house kind of a thing, but
yeah.
when that but and it was nice, but it wasn't a big deal. And he says he says it wasn't a big deal growing up, we moved around a lot, sometimes we didn't even have a Christmas tree. And she's like,
She's like freaking out, like she's about to have a panic attack slash heart
yeah.
attack slash both.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine having a Christmas tree, and mine is fake, but still, like being able to decorate it and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and then going to my parents and enjoying their real one.
Yeah, she's like, I need to call Child Protective Services. Like, what's happening? You
Yeah,
didn't have a
hi,
Christmas
Child
tree?
Protective Services. Can I talk to you about a case from 25 years ago?
So, so Gil Bellows, he's like so smooth in this movie, and he says, "Well, in return, let me take you around. Let me, in return for doing this, let me take you around." And Faith Ford's like, "Okay," and the next day she goes out and she sees this pretty dress. The only thing I wish the dress had been green or red.
Yeah, to make
Just
it
for
more, because there wasn't a lot of
no,
holiday stuff in this movie per
yeah.
se. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
it wasn't the most Christmassy movie, and part of that is probably because a lot of the things that make this unique is probably because this movie was made in 2011, and
mhm,
so you're talking kind of old school Hallmark
yeah.
that was a little bit different than current Hallmark.
Well, but also they're
Just-
focusing on the relationships. Like
yeah,
this is something that could have happened over summer, right? And they
hmm
could have just
right,
changed, whatever the family thing was with the brothers. But yeah, I thought when they met with the police officer, I thought that was cute and funny. But I also felt like they vibed right away.
yes,
But like not like, I don't think he was like, hey, like he even jokes later, well, I had to ask you out for dinner so you wouldn't sue me for calling the cops on you in the house and that sort of thing. And but I also love it, she doesn't know how to work anything.
yeah.
And he helps her with like there's 74 remotes.
Yeah,
And
you
I
really
don't.
have the two contrasts. You have the one relationship, which is Gabriel Miller, Tom Cavanaugh, that's opposites attract
Yes.
trope. And then
Yeah.
you have the like she even says, I just felt so comfortable.
Yeah.
I felt so comfortable talking to him.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have both relationships going on. And then you have like the two college students that are just like normal and functional.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt like in some ways they were both opposites attract, but the opposites attract for Faith Ford and the Delightful Man was like maybe the way they live their life, right?
Mhm.
Like she's, small town, he's in Boston, he
Right,
owns
I
a
can see
business,
that.
she's a teacher. But the other couple I felt like were more in the same realm, like publishing and
Oh
like
yeah,
PR
that's
type
true.
stuff, but that their personalities are kind of like almost
Hmm
this, in a way they were almost like similar, which made them butt heads.
Yeah. So it makes it a nice mixture to have both of them, I think, in the story.
Yes,
And I
plus the
really,
normal college kids.
right. And so they go on this date and they have just such a comfortable time. And one of the things I think that shows that they're so compatible is the way that he listens to her and doesn't judge her for the fact that she's talking about Frank, her husband, quite a bit. And he actually seems to think that's a really attractive quality about her, that she had this stable, loving relationship. He sees it as she's a loving person. She's a kind person. And I think that the fact that he's just such a good listener and isn't sort of judging her for her past, or the fact, because that could be kind of a turnoff in a way of like, oh, she keeps bringing up her ex, like that's her this perfect guy am I gonna live up to or whatever. And so you could be kind of threatened by that, you could be but he chooses to just see it as this beautiful thing. And I think that goes a long way to really, you like him as a character almost instantaneously. You like him because he is such a good listener.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I liked about it is also like considering the friendship aspect of it. They don't know each other. He's trying to make her feel comfortable about after everything that's happened that might have been embarrassing or just weird, or just like, oh, maybe I should just go home, or, those kinds of things. And so in a way, it's like they don't really have any connection. And she even asks at the end of the day, did you only take me out because, and he says yes, but then he knocks on the door and says, well, now that we got the lawsuit out of it.
Yeah,
that was such a great line. But I think that dinner, though, too, is like, I think they were just like two human beings talking about stuff, and there wasn't necessarily any expectations or like that something was gonna happen or anything like that, because she's leaving and he's staying here, and it's just someone staying in his brother's apartment. And so that sort of not having the pressure of any romantic relationship or expectations allows maybe people to talk and listen to each other more openly and that sort of thing. And they kind of build, at least, they have kindness for each other. And I thought that was really cool, right? That's sort of where you need to start, even in romantic relationships. But there might be too much pressure and trying to, be slick and put the moves on or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. He just, there's something about him in this movie that's just so sexy. He's so swoon worthy. Gabriel Miller. So she says, I'll run interference on the kids, on the neighbors, all. And basically she kind of agrees to cook for him. Well, he gives her a 1-day trial. And then the next day she finds out that the next bus doesn't come. And of course there's no hotels, of course.
Because she surprised her friend. Without talking to anyone. And then this guy's in there, and he's hoping to be there by himself and get through his writer's block. And so he's like, I want you to leave. And she's like, but once I think he's more open to it when there isn't a way for her to get out. And so like, but still it's like, leave me alone.
And so she finds out that he is writing this novel. And so she even sees it there. He leaves it there.
There. Can we talk about this?
This was 2011. It was a little more believable then. Now, I think the idea of even printing your novel is...
I still print stuff because I need to see hard copy. It's really hard for me to do. So that's not the issue. The issue is, like you said, she saw it. He left it out and she picked it up. And then she read it without asking him. And he,
she did.
Like, freaks out. He's like, that's my work. Like, and I do see, like, writing as something that's very private for people, even if it's going to be, like, mass consumed. And so I understand, like, his just, like, how dare you? If my wallet was out, would you go through that as well? And the thing is, like, so there is that part of me, where I teach about privacy and information and things like that, and where I was like, oh, clutch my pearl, she's reading his book. But then there's something really bold about her doing that, because it made a huge difference for him. And that's tricky, right? Because if you cross some boundary with someone and it doesn't turn out good, he could have kicked her out then. But then when he reads through her comments, which she put on sticky notes because she didn't want to ruin his pages, which I guess is thoughtful.
Yeah, and there's lots of post-it notes in that book.
I got some feedback for you. And then that's the other thing is most of us getting feedback, we see it as rejection, right? And so, and I especially imagine for writers getting something back that, like, after you've done all this work, it's just like, it gives me flashbacks to my dissertation, but let's not go there.
Right. But like, there's lots of really cute moments between them. Like she at one point she's like smelling him, which is weird. But when she's like, "What's that smell?" And he's like, "It's my aftershave." And he's like, "What do you think?" Not bad.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, so I think her crossing that boundary in some ways is what he ended up needing.
Yeah.
And that most people wouldn't be open to. And so it brought a lot of cool moments. But when it first happened, I was literally, my mouth was, I was like, "Oh, your reading is right." Yeah. I don't know if that was just me, but I couldn't believe it.
It is a definite boundary crosser. She's a boundary crosser for sure. And you also have at the same time, Gil Bellis is trying to decide whether he's going to sell his company. And his main decision is, what will I do with that time? What will I do? And then Faith Ford talks about, well, maybe I'm scared. I'm scared to move forward. I'm scared to, and he says, well, you should have some fun, take a chance, these things. And she says, this from the man who was in India 4 times before visiting the Taj Mahal.
Burn.
And he says,
gotcha.
He says, I figured I'd always have time. And she says, that's what Frank used to say. And so it's such a good dynamic between the two of them. Yeah. It's like they both have something to kind of teach each other, something to listen, something to, I think that makes them a really good match.
Yeah. And I feel like what we see with their relationship is after that first date and he knocks on the door after the first date, after they say goodnight, and he's like, well, now that we got the lawsuit out of the way, they go sightseeing and then they start seeing each other, and it moves fairly quickly from there because it's clear that they like each other. But back in Washington, they seem to hate each other. But he smells good. Right.
And she says it's really interesting. So she reads the book and she just says, that the problem is that the main character, one of the characters, Samantha's character, the girlfriend, is a total witch. Feel free to respell, which I thought was funny. And then he says she's the antagonist, and then she says, but she's evil. I keep expecting her to kick a puppy or foreclose on an orphanage. He says, if Edward is in love with a woman like that, it makes him look like an idiot. And she says the problem is that you do not know how to write for women, which I think is interesting. And she says, I would have thrown the book out in the first chapter because clearly the author does not understand women. And that is exactly the attitude all men have. And he goes, all men. So they have this. So
it starts a little bit of a battle, and I think there's lots of interesting things going on there. One is that he doesn't think she has any credibility, but she's saying, but I'm someone who'd read the book, and I'm telling you I wouldn't read it, right? But number 2, she's saying that if anyone falls in love with Samantha, they're an idiot. But basically, we learn later it's about his ex-fiance. Yeah. So in some ways, at that particular moment, she's calling him an idiot.
But she's also calling herself out because she, with this relationship with her husband, is basically kind of reading her own relationship into this book. And I just love when he's like, he says, now I know what I'm dealing with. And then he gives his note. He gives her notes on Macbeth when he talks about what Lady Macbeth would say. And then she says, but in Lady Macbeth, she's not based on someone, and he says, and he says, and Gabriel says, she's based on someone you hate. Big difference.
Yeah.
which I think is really, really important. And he
Yeah, it's
basically
sort of like a ding, ding, ding moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and he kind of writes her off as sort of this feminist who's just like hates all men. And she even kind of at the beginning kind of is in that sort of a little bit of that kind of bitter, resentful kind of state. So, but it doesn't mean what she's saying isn't true. So there's just an interesting dynamic going on there, where they both are letting their life history, which we can't help but do, sort of taint their view of this, or their read of this fictional example. And I don't know, it's interesting.
Each other.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is we all do that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like our past history is going to impact going into current relationships or how we view the world. And I thought that was really interesting.
It was really good. Yeah. And and then and we have, I think that all of these people have such great chemistry together. Just tons of chemistry.
I just didn't know if Tom Cavanaugh and her were gonna get together or not. Like I knew, like once we got past the police officer situation with the other two, I was like, yeah, they're gonna end up in a relationship. And then I was like, I'm not so sure. And I kind of liked that not being like in the end it is predictable, but also at the time though I was like, I'm not sure, maybe they'll just help each other to a point where it was nice to meet each other and to have these things happen and then go off into different relationships. But here they so, and spoiler alert,
Gabrielle Miller tells Faith Ford, she says, I just want you to protect yourself because you're not going to be there very long. And so that sort of is an interesting thing, because she has been so sort of free with, she's been comfortable because I think she's out of her element. She's out, she's not worried about judgment of neighbors, judgment of anything else. She's just been herself with him. And I think that sometimes being in a new environment can be freeing like that.
Absolutely. I think you might surprise yourself with the type of things that you might try or the things that you'll go out on a limb for. And was this when they were talking on the phone? Because can we talk about that scene for a moment? Because it was one of my favorite scenes of the movie, because it's the two friends talking to each other about what's going on, and they have a couple, I think, different phone calls, but this one in particular, it's a split screen, and in the middle is both of their coffee mugs.
That was clever.
And so one friend's pouring into her cup, and then our other friend picks up, and so it to me, it kind of visually showed that they were connecting, and that's what friends do, especially women get together to talk. And so although they were at a great distance, they were still doing what you might expect those kinds of friendships to do. And they were kind of checking in on each other about the brothers. Well, because it's like, well, what's the other brother like? Well, he's awful, but he smells good and he's not bad to look at.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of like just like a friend chat over tea, coffee, or whatever they were drinking. And I just not only liked the conversation, but visually it really, I think, makes a mark for friendship as well.
Yeah. And you get a little bit of it between Tom Cavanaugh and Gil Bellows, and Tom Cavanaugh says her place is like a Hallmark card.
That was hilarious, because I was like, oh snap, we got Hallmark jokes inside a Hallmark movie. I think it would have been better if he said, it's like one of the houses you might see in a Hallmark movie. That would have been, I would have been on the floor laughing.
It was really, because 2011 though was before there were that many. Like Hallmark did, I think like 4 movies, 5, something like that. It was not their 40 like they did last year. But yeah, and so then Gil Bellows takes forth Faith Ford out touristing, and she kind of says that that you don't go to the places that are the big touristy places until people come into town, and that is definitely true about places, and you find out that I would think that you would empty your purse before you go on a trip, but she evidently didn't, because she still has all the stuff from her second graders in her purse. She's got chattering teeth and a little dump truck thing toy.
And I was like, how'd you get on the plane with all that crap?
Yeah. And you also have the scene where Gabriel Miller is giving notes to Tom Cavanagh, and he opens the door, and she's in like her little kind of slightly sexy nightgown.
Yeah.
That was nice. That was a fun scene. That was a fun scene.
Yeah.
And she tells him much better. It was much better, his corrections. So we're seeing some movement and
development.
Yes. And so Heather is getting frustrated in Phoenix. She just feels like it's not Christmas. She wants Andrew Francis to watch It's a Wonderful Life. And he says to her, do you want to go home? And so he's being a pretty decent listener, I would say, to her and watching, because not even just listening, but really like watching and trying to see that she's more, because she's talking the talk. Oh, everything's fine. It's fine. But he can tell that she's not happy.
Yeah.
And so they're now talking about the book, and Gabriella says Samantha is complex now, and he says, I would have thought a woman wrote it, and that's a compliment for her.
Yeah.
She says most men do not know how to write strong female characters. You're either a sex object or a mother figure.
Right on.
And then she says, I don't hate men, I just don't like them all the time. Which I think there is some truth to what she's saying here. That there are a lot of even heralded authors whose female characters will be either the sex object or the mother. And even someone like Dickens, for instance, almost all his female characters are sort of ingenues that are sort of perfect, and like Tale of Two Cities. The female character in that is just kind of this object of aspiration for these men that do this sort of the sacrificing in the end. And I'm not saying those books are bad. Those obviously they're classics, but it is something that's true that I think part of the reason why something like Little Women has resonated for so long is because it presents all these different women.
I was gonna say there's more than two types of women in the world. That there are a lot of women who exist in men's life that it's like they're not even picking up on the nuances and that sort of thing. And so I think it's important to understand people to be able to rate people as they are in stories and TV shows, books, etc. And it's not just like, oh, we have to have a woman here. It's like, no, women exist in this world. How are you going to have them exist in this story like they would in the world?
And that's not to say there's something wrong with having a character that's there for a romantic purpose, or a character that's a mother figure. They can be fine, but it's about how they're used in the story. And like she's saying now, Samantha, she's a complex character. She's not just a villain.
And my first thought as you're talking was, mothers can also be the sex object. Like you can even have both, right? Like you can have multiple layers as a person. And that's why I like, when you see people ask male authors about that, and it's like, well, is it the author of Game of Thrones? Well, I've always just seen women as people or something like that. And I think Joss Whedon has also written or been asked about that before too. And so,
and he says, I can't wait till you stop asking me that question.
And then keep working, buddy.
And so basically Gil Bellows and Faith Ford get a Christmas tree, and she decorates it using a second grade teacher tools of the only thing about the thing with the paper chains and the snowflakes is making those paper chains takes forever.
I would have been like, let's just go get some tinsel somewhere.
Like going to a dollar store. You're set. That's probably what I would have done.
CVS on the corner in Boston, done.
But it looked really cute, and Faith Ford forgot to stop the delivery of Christmas tree. And the whole story is that Heather was sad when they were cutting down the Christmas tree as a little girl that they were hurting the Christmas tree. So they just always had it delivered ever since then. And so that was pretty funny when the Christmas tree gets dropped off at the house, and they're like, what are we gonna do with the Christmas tree? And Tom goes like, it's not coming in here.
Yeah.
And
it's like their relationship isn't at the point that Faith Ford and Gil Bills is in Boston. They're not ready for a tree.
He's like, you're the interloper, and she's like, I prefer guest.
Yeah, really this movie had a lot of great comedic moments.
It did.
Lines.
A lot of good banter.
Yeah.
And we get super sexy moment when Gil Bellows says, when they're decorating, this is the first time in a long time that it actually feels like Christmas, and we get our first kiss. And this movie has way more PDA than a typical Hallmark movie, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they were like, well, we'll wait to that scene because we're not there.
Gabriel Miller even asks her, "Did you get lucky?" I'm like, "What?
Who wrote this? How did this get past the Hallmark folks?"
Which is
proving
great.
Stories.
But it really, I mean, it makes sense. It feels believable.
Yeah, it felt
they're adults.
fine.
I mean, and they have such chemistry together,
the
two of them, I think.
Yeah.
And
it was
and
fun.
you get.
I was surprised.
Oh, I was surprised too. It's so attractive when he says, I wish I could say I know how you're feeling, but I've never felt like that with anyone before. And she says, well, you should try because it's great. And he says, I think I'm learning. I'm starting to feel that way right now. That is really sexy, both because he doesn't say he understands when he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
And that's such an easy thing to be like, oh, I understand, or because you're trying to be empathetic, but you don't understand. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, it's like the perfect way to express empathy, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great moment between the two of them.
Well, it always feels like he means what he says.
Yeah.
Like it's always with some level of thought, which is nice.
She says that she feels like she's cheating on Frank, that she's a little confused, and he's just so like comforting and kind. And she also asks him like, why are you single? What's going on? And he basically is like, I was married to the job, the old story. Never found and she says, why didn't you just take her with you? Maybe I didn't like her as much. and just all of that interaction, I think, is just so swoon worthy.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So good. Love it. And then you have Gabriel Miller and Faith Ford and Heather are on a 3-way conversation, that kind of thing, because she actually has been not answering the phone calls from her daughter, which is like a huge step because she wants to be invested in this relationship. Yeah. But then her daughter's like, oh, what's happening?
That's unusual for the daughter. Yeah. 10 times a day.
She's like, do I say that you're okay or that you're? I'm like, what do I say?
Yeah.
It's great. That whole thing is just really, really great. And Gabriel Miller makes lobster before, and she says she doesn't know how to cook, but she's pretty decent to me. So that's pretty good. I could hire her.
Is this the scene where or was it was with Tom Cavanaugh? Yeah, this is where she tells about her husband, what happened with them moving to San Francisco. She was perfectly happy living in South whatever, and and he moves her to San Francisco and then leaves 3 months later, which is brutal. Yeah, no, that is terrible. So no wonder she's bitter. Yeah. And then we start to find out more about his ex-fiance, and that really, really was tough for him. And he tells her, you've been extremely helpful. Yeah. And still business and friendship only. Yeah. And Gabriel Miller says, it's a good story. You just have to soften Samantha. And he says, it wasn't easy.
and that's when he admits that they that they broke up on Christmas Eve. This is after they'd gone to dinner together, actually.
Because one of my favorite parts of the movie, just because of the banter, was I think she's got going through his feedback at a restaurant, and he comes in and she's like, "Are you stalking me?" And they sit down and like, "Let's call it truce." And she's like, "Because I want to know what happens." Like, I think she says something along the lines like, "Does he murder her?" Like, he has just like, I was like, is this Lifetime? I was like, but she's joking. Like,
I mean, this is the ultimate Hallmark betrayal, that he walks in on his ex-fiance and she's undecorating the tree on Christmas Eve because she's leaving that day.
Why can't you just leave what's on the tree? Like, why?
Like that is a breakup if I've ever heard one. I mean, that is a villain. No wonder he painted her as the villain. She took the decorations off the tree. What is this, Grinch?
Well, it's like, only take keepsakes. Otherwise, leave them on there. You don't need them. You can get them later. But it's also like
she even took the last can of Who Hash. I mean, this is villain.
But it's also like, why is that the day? Like, is it just like you can no longer, or it's like, at least do it like the week before or something? Like, you obviously had feelings that you didn't want to go through the holidays with this person. Let's not already ruin a holiday that is not a happy time for him by breaking up in this way. So clearly both him and who's the friend that's in the house with reading his book? What's her name again?
It's Faith. Yeah, Faith is her name.
But
Gabrielle Miller is the actress.
Yeah, like, so it's like they both resent their former partners because they had horrible breakups. Like, brutal things happen. Like, I mean, there's worse things that can happen, but this is still stuff that's hard to get over.
Well, and this is the key that they say, because he says, "I don't hate Christmas. I just don't want to be reminded of things." And she says, that is the problem with the holidays. The good stuff is always so much better than it is, and the depressing stuff is always so much worse.
Amen.
And I think that is definitely true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it makes the bad stuff seem even worse because you're thinking about how the good stuff is so much better.
Yeah. You know? Or that you're doing good stuff without people in your life that you usually did the good stuff with, which makes the worst stuff. Empty. Like, you're very connected. You can't have the dark without the light, and you can't have the light without the dark, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Tom Cavanaugh says maybe it'll get good someday soon. So that was a very little cute thing. Mm-hmm. And so Andrew Francis comes in and he says to Heather, "All right, we're gonna fly. We're going back home." And that was super cute. Yeah. He's like, "I'm not going to hear it. We're going."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, man, way to go.
See, again, we don't need to worry about them. They're fine.
They got it.
Maybe they could do little lessons for these other couples. Little PowerPoint presentation, little role play or something to help them figure out, like, what it's like to be in conflict, or how to break up with people, or how to, have a conversation.
Yeah. So Tom Cavanaugh finishes the book, and Gil Bellis decides to sell his company. He says, "I played it safe my whole life, and I'm going to take a chance." Super cute. And Gil Bellis gets her a present, gets her earrings. It was so cute. Oh
yeah, that was great.
So, and they have some more PDA before they gets the present, though. She's like, not until Christmas.
I'm not doing it until after midnight. Christmas is when presents happen, and it's not Christmas yet.
Also, Gabrielle Miller character is super fast reader.
Yeah.
She gets through this whole book in like one day. I mean, I guess she didn't have much else to do.
Yeah.
But still.
She's just waiting for the bus or train or whatever transportation to get the heck out of there.
I know. And she comes downstairs and she sees him decorating the tree. And it was so cute. I love it. It was really good.
Changed his mind about Christmas Eve.
Yeah. So good. And so they're all, and so Faith Ford and Wells are kissing, and in walks Heather, and super surprise, super cute. And that's when after they've talked or whatever, that by the elevator they're talking, and that's when he gives her the earrings, and it was so cute. He's like, I like, 'cause spend time with your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. It's just so cute. That whole scene is really.
Yeah.
She's like, I love them. And he's like, I gave the receipt just in case you want to return them. It was so cute.
She's like, no, I'm not going to return them. But I also liked when the daughter interrupted and she's like, how'd you get in here? The door's unlocked. Even though it was Boston, this lady who never locks her door unlocked the door and didn't have it locked in Boston, which I thought was funny too.
It didn't even seem like there was a door. It seemed like it was just that one of those apartments where the elevator just opens to the apartment.
I thought there was a door.
And maybe there was, and I missed that.
And then the elevator's right outside, kind of like in Frasier.
Right. Maybe there was. But anyway, and so the Heather's kind of surprised, and it's really cute with that earrings thing. But he's like, I'm just gonna stay home, be with your daughter for Christmas, and then we get our kiss between Gabrielle Miller and Tom Cavanagh, and it's super cute. They're just like back and forth, and he's like, you're in this house. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
And she says, I think you should just go ahead and kiss me.
Yeah,
and
that was
I
cute.
agree.
We all been waiting. Tick-tock, buddy.
It's so good. And I think coming up next is, I think, one of the key scenes in the film. So you have Faith Ford is like putting together, about to eat breakfast. Her daughter wakes up and she says, well, we're gonna have Christmas pancakes, right? And she says, that how about we just have some fruit? And so she's starting to kind of break the traditions, and Faith Ford says to her daughter, I don't want to look at the photos right now. She says, it's important not to forget these, but these last few days have made me realize it's never going to be the same. And when I look at those photos, I just feel alone.
Yeah.
And I thought that
photos of her husband who
and I thought it was a really important moment for her character, because she's being honest with her daughter in a way that she never has been before. And I think that her daughter's listening in a way that she hasn't before, and shows a lot of maturity in the scene. And I don't know, I just think it's a really important scene for those characters. And
absolutely
showing that, like Christmas traditions and other things are important, but they can also be kind of a way to not sort of deal with conflict and deal with, you can kind of hide it behind tradition or other things like that, and not really get to the core of why you're hurting, because you just keep going on with what your routine is and what you're used to doing, and you don't maybe take a second to stop and think, why am I not happy? And so this is, I thought it was a really lovely moment in the script.
And and that's clearly she's made it to the point where it's like moving out of whatever rut or where she was stuck. It's time to also move on, like, and that she's at the point where she's good with that, and hopes her daughter is too.
And she says, it made me accept that things change, and I may have been holding on to my past a little too much. It's time to take a chance. And I think you could say that with all four of these characters.
Absolutely.
They've all been holding on to the past too much. And that maybe it's time to take a chance, try something new, start new traditions. Because as great as old traditions are, sometimes we need to start new traditions.
Blueberry coffee cake.
That's right. Ding, ding, ding. Very good. Very, very, very good. So then Gabrielle Miller wakes up, and she's getting ready to go to the bus station. But Tom Cavanagh's forgotten it, and he's making her breakfast. And you can see when he realizes that she's going on the bus, you could just see like his face, like, oh no. And that's really cute. And then she's gonna go on the bus. He gets on the bus and he says, why are you going on a bus? You don't want to be on a bus on Christmas Day. And she says, of course not. I was waiting for you to see something. Well, I was waiting for you to say something.
They're perfect for each other.
So cute. It's so
gonna be like
adorable.
that in 40 years when they're still
I
married.
know.
No, I was waiting for you. No, I was waiting.
And the bus driver's like, I'd really like to get home for Christmas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, then they end up, and then you see them kissing outside on the bus depot. It's super cute. And then Heather says to her mom, she says, what I want you to do is get dressed up and go to his place, put on those earrings. And she says, I'm not going to leave you alone for Christmas. And so they end up bringing a tree, and he's watching his Celtics, and they bring Chinese. It's so cute, adorable. And they even decorate the tree. Yeah. And they bring it up, and that's the end of the movie. And you see there's a little epilogue where you see 1 year later, Gabrielle Miller is pregnant. Wow, they got busy quick.
Well, if you waited this long for a partner, there's no more time to wait.
Yeah. And they're all three couples are still together. You get the impression that he's moved to Washington to be with her. Yep. And it's just super cute. Yeah. And delightful.
Yeah, I was like, I thought that made a lot of sense. And then what they've done is create sort of like their own little family together.
Right. That's true. It's kind of an urban tribe kind of situation. So there you go. That is my favorite Hallmark Christmas movie, Trading Christmas. I think it has really good characters. I think it has really good writing. I think it's really romantic. It could maybe be a little more Christmassy, but it has enough to me to have those Christmas feels. Yeah. And I don't know. I just really like it. I think it's a really solid rom-com. Yeah. And multiple rom-coms, 3 rom-coms in one. So I really love it. So I'm glad you loved it too. Yay!
Yeah, I specifically like it because you get to see the development, and you can see that it's like even in romantic relationships that, like in the case of Faith Ford and Gil Bellows, that they sort of connect and become, their relationships develops a little bit faster through what friends do, right? Talking and listening, and there's no expectations, and then when they finally realize that they do like each other, then it moves very quickly. But then with Gabrielle and Tom, it's like they're just trying to get to even being able to deal with each other in the same room. And then they move that way. And I also like seeing like that the mom and daughter have a new sort of friendship relationship by the end. But one thing that I was cracking up about, and if you don't want something like this to happen, you always let people know where you're going for Christmas, because if not, someone's going to be in Arizona, someone's going to be in Washington, and someone's going to be in Boston. And I know the point of surprises is to surprise people, but Christmas is a big deal for a lot of people. You might want to have those more planned.
It's probably not, like, birthdays, I think, are a better surprise.
Yes.
A surprise venue than Christmas, I think.
Or at least it's like the daughter and the friend need to talk to each other, or the brother and the, like we just need a little bit, you need to have like a secret partner, like a partner to help you make the secret happen, or the surprise happen. But that's true. But that's like that's what's cute about the movie, is like they're all not where the other thinks they're gonna be.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's very true. That's
to
a lesson.
Step out their normal comfort zone to be able to build new relationships. So yes.
So back, coming up when we're actually able to travel safely. Yeah. Maybe try to not make it a surprise. In
exactly.
The future.
And definitely not now, even if you can social distance with people. Surprise is probably not a good idea.
Probably not, no.
I don't know if anyone's heart can take it.
Yeah. So there we go. That is Trading Christmas. So this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. And so let us know your thoughts on Trading Christmas. Is it a favorite of yours? What do you think about it? We'd love to hear in the comment section or on Twitter. Please let us know if you have any ideas for what we could talk about on Friendship next month. Always grateful for your suggestions. And
can it be something with Gil Bellows?
Yes. We'll watch old Ally McBeal episodes and comment, or maybe Love in the Time of Corona will have come out by then, and that will be next month's.
Well, if not, we'll just earmark that one for later.
All right.
On the schedule.
He's filming it right now. Gil, if you're listening, we are very excited. Come on our podcast.
I was going to say, is this one when you have a guest that I can guest as a guest host to be there for that interview?
I promise.
I won't say anything. I'll just...
Yeah, I promise. So, all right. Well, very good. So where can people find your podcast and you on social media, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, Best Forevers Pod is located on all your favorite podcatchers, and I'm at Best Forevers Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then my webpage is alysalucas.com.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check that out. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave us your ratings and reviews. We really, really, really appreciate it. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much too. And we have our patron group, which is so much fun. And we also have our merch store, which has tons of fun Hallmark inspired merch. So check that out as well. And thanks again, Alysa. This is always so much fun.
Always.
And Merry Christmas in July, everyone.
Merry Christmas in July.